I'm still shocked so few people talk about Riyria Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. So we're going to talk about it some more today.
I'm down to talk.
Nice.
Hi there, and welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son sit down and talk about fantasy books. I'm the son of that equation, Zach.
And I'm the father, Jim. Thanks for joining us today for this just quick take episode. A few minutes here talking about a series we've enjoyed and given the real skinny on our opinion about it, why we enjoy it, and if there is anything we don't enjoy, we might mention that too. If you enjoy this, as always, hit the like button. Let us know. That's how we know what we're putting out here is working for you. And if you subscribe, that's even better. Speaking of subscribers, Zach,
What
I've
you
got
got for me?
something I wanted to put up here on the screen
Let's take a
because,
look.
you know, we don't always remember to highlight such things, but wow, there it is. We have broke
Hey!
1,500 subscribers on YouTube. This actually happened a few days back. We're at 1,533, but there's no graphic for 1,533.
There could be.
There could be. So there we go. I just thought I'd share that here today. Whoop, whoop.
That's exciting.
Thank you again, everybody who's joining us. We get more coming on each day. I guess we're putting something out that's somewhat entertaining.
So, speaking of theoretically somewhat entertaining, what are we talking about today?
Riyria Revelations, a 3-book or 6-book series by Michael J.
3, 6,
Sullivan.
bit of both. Depends
Yeah,
on
you want to
which of
explain
the.
that just a touch?
Yeah, it's like each book is actually 2 books, and sometimes that one book of the 2 books it makes sense and is a continuous story, and it's like, yeah, it's one book, and sometimes it's like, no, these are 2 totally different stories that just kind of lead into each other, and they're placed in the one book.
This is where Sullivan started as an author, and he was self-published, and he's just dropping these out there, and then they caught on like wildfire, at least in the areas, the circles that people were paying attention. Again, a lot of people have never heard of these, but he got recognized and picked up by a publisher, so now he is making a living as an author. So there's certainly some people who know about him, and this series, there's reasons. It's an interesting series.
It's got some great characters, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Key, of course, being the duo pictured behind me, Royce and Hadrian.
Which, granted, if that is the duo pictured behind you, then one of my biggest problems with this series is the art, because that does not look anything like that.
Royce is the little guy.
And Royce is the problem with the art there.
Okay. If you say so.
A number of things are very wrong about that, starting with using a sword.
The Hadrian picture is pretty good, though.
Hadrian's fine.
Yeah. So something I do actually like, and just to put it out here, I enjoyed this series. It's not one that I, go, man, I can't wait to reread it. Going through it once was entertaining for me. But there are more books coming out in this world. There are more out there waiting already to be read that I do look forward to reading. I mean, the ones I haven't read are on my TBR because Riyria Revelations is this set of 6 books. They're mini books, so they're really published as 3 books that just drops you into the middle of a world. You've got these characters, Royce and Hadrian, flung into an adventure, but there's a whole backstory on them that you know nothing about when you start these books. You just can tell they've got history. There's stuff that's gone on before that leads them to be who they are when we enter the story.
Both as individuals and a partnership.
Yeah. Now, a key question when we come into the story is, are they good guys?
They're guys.
They're bad guys with standards.
Well, bad guys is a very, questionable term in the first place, because, what makes a good guy versus a bad guy? Are they committing crimes? Usually.
Yes.
Yeah. But also, are they getting paid for these crimes often
Yes.
by the nobility and legal parties, also usually get so.
They live on the shady side of society of this time. They're hired to get jobs done. The
That being
jobs
said,
are typically not legal, but perhaps
mhm,
sometimes the right thing to do.
and it can be said more about Hadrian than it can Royce, but probably both of them to a certain extent. Morally speaking, these aren't necessarily bad guys.
No, no, they're definitely not. They have a code. They are in the situation they are because of circumstances that led them into this. And that's what we don't get to learn a lot about here in these books. But Sullivan goes on to write Riyria Chronicles, which are prequel stories that fill you all in, bring you completely up to speed with how they come to be who they are. But that's not what we're talking about here today. We're
No,
talking about this story.
just
And
these 3 6 books.
which is really one big story.
It is. It's a trilogy.
It's all connected, even though there's little sub tales happening in here. It's classic fantasy. You've got the typical Western European style.
We've got our
Here,
swords and our sorcery.
there are, yep, there's magic, there's fighting, there's races. Specifically, we got humans and we got elves and we have half elves. And
And we
that,
got some other things here and there, but like not as prominently.
right, that dynamic, humans and elves, is actually the underpinning of everything that's happening in this world. And that's part of what you discover when you're reading these books. Again, just clarifying, this is not a full spoil episode, so we're
No,
not
we're
going
not
to tell
getting
you
too deep into
everything,
anything.
but we're just kind of giving you the taste of why, what this is about and why we like or don't like it. So we had to mention that.
And speaking of characters having backstory to them, having more before and just getting dropped into this world, this is a pretty well thought out and realized world. There is substantial world building that we're led to slowly over time that isn't just the state of things as they are, but also history going back a couple thousand years,
Yeah.
pretty well established of a timeline that we get a picture of pretty clearly. We start to understand the rules of the world, of religion and magic and politics within this world, and different pieces of it in different places within the world, including different nations having different political structures. It's got legs.
Yes. You mentioned political structures. Politics is a big part of this story, even though these two guys aren't into politics.
No, not
But
really.
they are used by the political movers and shakers in multiple ways. One might say as tools, another might say as pawns. Perhaps both is appropriate.
I like to think of them as vectors.
Vectors. Okay. And then there is another tool slash pawn slash political player in all of this. How do you say his name again? Ezra Haddon?
It's definitely Ezra.
Ezra.
I thought it was like Harding or something.
Ezra Hardin? Ezra
I don't
Hardin?
remember off the top.
Hardin?
Point is,
Anyways,
his name's Ezra, and it's so weird to have a fantasy vibe thing, and a guy's name is just Ezra. It's like, that's not as strange as I thought it was going to be.
it's kind of funny. He comes off when we first meet him as just some scary, dangerous, imprisoned, magical, evil wizard.
And maybe he is.
Then he turns more into like a Gandalf kind of character.
Maybe he is.
And then he turns into like maybe Dark Gandalf. It's
Maybe
hard
he
to
is.
figure him out. He's fascinating,
He's got facets.
which is good. It takes the place of not having hands, which we won't talk about why. There's a reason for that, but we meet the dude and he has no hands. And
Oops.
yet he can do a lot of things.
Oops.
That's another character that is like an important part of this story and yet is so much bigger than this story. He just is featured as part of the tale here, but when you go to the other books that have been written, he's a big player because he's also really old.
Yeah.
You mentioned the story goes back like 1,000 years. Well, and
He
so
does too.
Yeah, yeah. He's not just a run-of-the-mill, live your 100 years and die guy. No, he's a magical being. Definitely adds an element to the story. Speaking of adding an element to the story, one of the characters I like the most is Gwen.
Okay.
Royce's girlfriend, lover, tense friend. It sways back and forth depending on the part of the story and the relationship. I liked her. I thought she was a good addition to the
She's
story.
lovely.
A noble person, also kind of in a sketchy profession. You do what you got to do in a world like this. And that perhaps is one of the things I like the most about Royce and Hadrian. They do what they got to do.
Yeah,
The world is not the way they would necessarily want it to be. They don't sit there and whine about that. They make the best of things.
I will say this trilogy of books does a really great job of showing us very capable heroes, people who are definitely good at what they do, and we get to see them be good at what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and yet still wander through and bumble various situations and try to figure things out, not because of necessarily crazy, insurmountable odds, though sometimes, but often because problems are more complex than one individual with great skills can manage. And so it gives us a nice dose of realism to this capable hero. It's not that capable heroes can't solve their problems because we read through the pages and we go, are they actually capable, or are you just wanting us to believe that while you're showing us they're an idiot? No, they are capable. The problems are just bigger than they are.
It's something I value about Royce and Hadrian. They are not paragons of virtue. They are not white knights. They are gray characters. They're just real people who have flaws, but also have noble traits. And the decisions they make in the circumstances before them sometimes are wonderful decisions and sometimes are not. More often than not, they're making good choices. But there are times their own struggles, their own doubts, their own flaws get in the way. They do have two very different characteristics, skill sets, personalities. How would you describe the difference between Royce and Hadrian?
Um, Hadrian is a fighter bordering on a paladin, and Royce is a rogue.
In D&D terms, there you got it, people. And that's not inaccurate. Which one would you describe as generally more optimistic?
Hadrian.
Almost rose-colored glasses optimistic. He seems to see the good in just about everything.
And yet, there is a certain amount of like the wanting good character who just gets beat down with the bad all the time. That gets depressing. And
You
he can
do
get
feel like
depressed.
at times he's just the good puppy who gets kicked,
Yeah.
and you feel bad for him. Speaking of, I was watching.
I don't know where we're going with kicked puppies that I want to go.
Oh no, I have to go here. House of the Dragon, season 2, episode 1 is out now.
I have not watched it yet.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you plot.
Well, you just told me to kick a
I'm not
puppy,
going to tell
so
you plot spoilers, but there is a guy who kicks a dog, and
no,
it's
not
like
okay.
instantly you know, A, this is a bad person, and B, he needs to die. No one kicks dogs. What is wrong with you? Yeah.
No one kicks you, Rolly.
It's an archetype. You don't kick a dog. He goes on just a little bit later in the scene to do the other major thing you never do. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But oh my
Okay,
goodness,
where
when you watch it, you'll know
white after Labor
exactly where
Day
I
or
was going.
something? I don't.
What did you say?
Where's white after Labor Day? What are we going here?
When you watch it, you'll go, "Oh, yeah, that's what he meant." Yep.
Okay.
Wow. So Hadrian is that guy. You want things to work out for him. You feel good, but if it goes bad, like with a dog, if you mistreat it long enough, it can turn mean. It can become very sad and unfriendly, and just the joy in life goes out of it. And that's Hadrian too. If it goes too far, even he can become depressed.
There's a fun, interesting observation that gets made, and it sounds bogus. I don't think this is necessarily true, but I
Okay.
like it being an explanation in world that like can be a deduction that people make, and I want it to catch on in other places of fantasy, where if someone's wearing one sword, they might know how to use it. If they're wearing two, they might know how to use one. They're probably just trying to be intimidating. If they've got three swords, that is so unwieldy and unlikely.
Run
They've
for
got
your
to be
life.
really good at all three of them.
Yep. And that's Hadrian, man. Yeah. Oof. But then we get to Royce. Royce is just a dark, negative little guy.
Just a little cloak and dagger, you know?
He said he's a rogue, and he's got the most negative of those rogue traits. He's still not a bad person. We've been clear about that. But he doesn't have rose-colored glasses. If anything, he looks at something and assumes the worst.
Mhm.
He'll generally see the negative side of anything. And this is where their partnership is probably good for them, even as they rub each other raw at times. Hadrian helps Royce see things a little more positively by wearing him down with his optimism. And Royce probably brings Hadrian down out of the clouds a little bit to see things a little more balanced.
Their relationship is purely platonic, but the bond between them is something that we really get to explore and really use as our anchor point in these novels. It truly is a compelling relationship.
Yeah. There is a point in the stories where they're not together, and you can tell they need to be back together.
Mhm.
Some couples are simply not whole on their own. These two belong side by side. Anything in particular you didn't care for with this story, without being big plot spoiler, of course.
Without being big plot spoiler. There's not a whole lot. I mean, I genuinely did enjoy these. I think the highs weren't as high as I have with some other series, so it's not like this is my top fantasy series of all time,
Hmm.
but it also doesn't have a whole lot that drags it down from where it was.
That really encapsulates how I feel a lot too. I mentioned this isn't one I'm really looking to go back and reread, but I totally enjoyed it. It just doesn't, yeah, it didn't hit the massive highs where I'm like, oh, it was just good.
If you
That
want
was that
something
was a fun
really
ride.
good, but not necessarily great, but doesn't have a lot of drawbacks in general, this is
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, there's not anything I can remember that I was like, wow, that sucks. I never would have done it like that. No, nothing really strikes me that way. And it's not just about the action, it's not just about the characters. It has a well-written plot. There's mystery in here that slowly gets uncovered as you work your way through that I found very satisfying. And at the same time, noting with the reveals that come along later in these books that the hints are all there.
Yeah,
The
if I
clues are
have
logical. It makes sense, though you wouldn't have necessarily guessed it all.
if I have
There's
any
one thing you might have
negatives,
guessed earlier that for some is a big reveal later, and that's about Royce. Not going to tell what it is. But that one I think was hinted pretty bluntly early on.
if I have any negatives, it's just that I don't think it's as unclear as you seem to be saying it is. Very few of the surprises were truly surprising.
Okay.
Some of them were easy to predict from a ways out, some from just pretty close, but most of them you can see coming before they actually land.
All right. So perhaps a little too transparent for you.
Maybe.
Okay. Just maybe.
Not enough that it like detracted from me enjoying it. I look back on it still fondly, but I don't remember really any like big aha surprises either.
Okay. One of our earliest supporters, Patreon supporters and followers, Emmeline, is the one who put me onto this series in the first place. She's a big fan of this series, and thank you. Now, it's still been something that was enjoyable to do. Now, have you been working your way through the prequel books yet?
Not at all. I've got so many other things to read, and where I sit here is I know that there is good content there. I know there are going to be good books, but I felt like what I got through the trilogy gave me a good foundation of some of that that I didn't feel the need that I'm gonna need to go dive into that necessarily.
That is so funny to hear you say that because that's exactly how I felt when I finished Riyria Revelations. And I was like, why would I want to read the Chronicles? Prequel stuff? I don't need that. And so but then I tried one and went,
Yeah.
oh, and then I felt completely different. So I've read all of the Chronicles that are out so far, and I'm waiting for the next one. They actually were worth my time and very enjoyable.
To my opinion, I feel like give it another couple years or something, and I'll have spent long enough away from this world that I'm like, I could go for back into that. Then I have new content. I don't have to try and be like, that was a good world. Do I want to reread it? I don't know if I want to reread it, but I can go in and find new content in that same world.
Another one of our longtime listeners, viewers, Marguerite on Discord, loves this series too, but he's covered the breadth of it all. So not just Chronicles, but the stuff I haven't done yet. There's like 2 earlier series, and literally they go farther and farther back in time. We said going back 1,000 years. Yeah, well, one of the book series goes back 1,000 years. They're all great, he says. So I got to get to them. They're on my TBR, but same problem you have. There's so many other things to read. So many books. They're not even on this year's schedule yet, but they're there. And I think I will enjoy them. And Michael J. Sullivan is still actively writing some of those. I have trouble just saying Mike Sullivan. It's got to be Michael J. Sullivan comes out every time.
Nah, it's Mike Sully.
Mike Sully. No,
You just take
Monsters
2 different
Incorporated
Monsters
now.
Inc. parts. You get Mike and Sully, and you're good.
We just need Boo. Any last words on this series before we wrap this one?
There is one element that I hope is addressed in any of that prequel stuff that I haven't read that gets a little more religious oriented. And I think it's one of the most interesting and most compelling things in this trilogy that we barely get any information about. And I think that's vague enough that it's not giving anything away, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
It's been a while since I've read these books. It's
Does it
not
help if I mention feathers?
Oh, yes. Yes, it does help. That helps considerably. Wow, how did I not think of that? In what I've read in Chronicles so far, there's no connection yet.
I doubt much of it gets addressed until certain little tidbits here and there, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's such an interesting other element to
Oh, yeah.
consider. Like it is a lens to consider the entire story through.
Right. No, that was a fantastic reveal there. And so I'm sure you go with the far back stuff. That's got to be in there somewhere too. The elements of that. The feather. Nice. Nicely said. Okay. That's where we'll wrap then. If you have not read Riyria Revelations, we do recommend it. It's entertaining. They're not super long, and they're pretty fast paced. So you can pick them up. I did them on Audible.
The audiobooks are pretty good.
Yeah, really well done. Won't take you a lot of time, especially if you like Zach, are reading at 2.0 speed.
I don't read that fast.
1.75.
I have been doing 1.75 lately.
Oh, or you could crawl along like I do at 1.0. They actually slow down more too if you want. I think you can slow it down to 0.75.
Yeah, because theoretically, an author, or rather a narrator, could read really quickly. Instead, they all just read really slow with big pauses. So you gotta speed them up a little.
Eloquent, expressive.
No, it's giving time for you to process and think. And if you're processing and thinking fast enough, you don't need that time.
I remain impressed that they can speed it up and it doesn't sound like the Chipmunks. It still sounds pretty good. The technology.
I mean, if you go to ×4, it often kind of does.
Oh my lord!
I did a Pern book that way once.
Come on, it doesn't go ×4.
I did a Pern book at 4x speed once.
No way. Okay, I'm looking at my Audible app. That can't be true.
I definitely did it partially on 3, and I think up to 4.
Only goes up to 2 on my default here.
Click the 2 and then look again.
I don't want to mess with this right now.
Once you're up there, it gives you more options.
Oh my. Oh my. This one only goes up to 3.5.
Okay.
But it does go down to 0.7. So you can slow it down.
But no, 100%. We were gonna have book club in 3 hours, and I hadn't finished the book yet. So I needed to make sure I finished it in 3 hours or less.
Crazy, man. All right. Well, that's where we'll leave you. Just a little tidbit. Again, we recommend Riyria Revelations, Michael J. Sullivan, written back in 2011 and 12. Yeah, he wrote them pretty quick, but they don't feel shoddy. They're good and entertaining, a fun ride. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.